What if the story of a modern nation didn't begin with borders, but with one of the world's oldest forgotten civilizations? What if beneath the soil of today's Pakistan lies a history so ancient it predates pyramids, empires, and even written memory? Who were the first people to walk this land? What did they build, and why did they vanish without a trace? From lost cities buried in silence to the birth of a powerful modern state, this is not just the history of a country. This is the story of human civilization itself. This is the complete history of Pakistan. Part 1. Prehistoric Origins. What if the story of a nation did not begin with borders, kings, or written records, but with footprints so ancient that even memory cannot reach them? The land we now call Pakistan carries a history that stretches far beyond recorded civilization, back into a time when early humans were just beginning to understand survival itself. Archaeological evidence suggests that human ancestors lived in this region for over 1 million years, leaving behind stone tools and traces of early life in areas such as the Soan Valley near modern-day Islamabad. These were not cities or kingdoms, but small groups of hunter-gatherers moving across rivers, valleys, and changing landscapes, fully dependent on nature for survival. Over time, these early humans entered what is known as the Stone Age, where their tools slowly improved and their understanding of the environment deepened. During the Paleolithic period, they used simple stone tools for hunting and cutting, while in the Mesolithic period they began forming stronger social groups and more efficient survival strategies. The greatest transformation came during the Neolithic Revolution, when humans began to settle permanently near fertile land and water sources. Agriculture slowly emerged, with crops like wheat and barley being cultivated, while animals such as goats and cattle were domesticated. This shift from constant movement to settled life marked one of the most important turning points in human history. Small villages began to form in regions that are now part of Balochistan and surrounding areas, creating early foundations of community living, storage systems, and basic social organization. Although there was no writing, no cities, and no known rulers, these early societies were building something far more important: the foundation of civilization itself. Every tool they shaped, every crop they planted, and every settlement they formed became part of a long chain of development that would eventually lead to one of the greatest ancient civilizations in the world. This prehistoric era may seem silent, but it is the beginning of everything. Without these early humans adapting to their environment and slowly mastering survival, the later rise of complex societies would not have been possible. It is here, in this deep and quiet past, that the story of Pakistan truly begins, setting the stage for the rise of advanced civilizations that would later transform this land forever. Part 2. Ancient Kingdoms and the Indus Valley Civilization. After thousands of years of slow human development during the prehistoric age, the land of modern Pakistan entered one of the most extraordinary chapters in ancient history: the rise of early civilizations that would shape the foundation of South Asian culture for millennia. Among them, the most remarkable was the Indus Valley Civilization, one of the world's earliest urban societies, which emerged around 2600 BCE along the fertile plains of the Indus River and its surrounding regions. This civilization was not built overnight, but grew from earlier farming communities that had already learned agriculture, settlement, and trade. What makes the Indus Valley Civilization so extraordinary is its level of urban planning and organization, which was far ahead of its time. Cities such as Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa featured carefully designed street grids, advanced drainage systems, and standardized brick construction, suggesting a highly coordinated society with skilled engineers and planners. Unlike many ancient civilizations, there is no clear evidence of large palaces or dominant ruling figures. which has led historians to believe that it may have been a more balanced or decentralized society. Trade played a crucial role in its development, connecting this civilization with regions as far as Mesopotamia and Central Asia, exchanging goods such as beads, pottery, metals, and agricultural products. The people of the Indus Valley also developed a unique script which remains undeciphered to this day, adding a layer of mystery to their identity and culture. Their daily life appeared highly organized, with evidence of standardized weights and measures suggesting strong systems of commerce and administration. However, despite its sophistication, the civilization began to decline around 1900 BCE. The exact reasons remain uncertain, but theories include climate change, shifting river patterns, declining trade routes, and possible natural disasters. As rivers changed course and agriculture became less sustainable, cities were gradually abandoned, and the once thriving urban centers faded into silence. Yet even after its decline, the legacy of the Indus Valley Civilization did not disappear. Its cultural and technological foundations influenced later societies in the region, leaving behind patterns of urban living, craftsmanship, and trade that would echo through future generations. After this decline, the region did not remain empty. Instead, it became home to various Indo-Aryan migrations and tribal societies that gradually shaped early cultural and religious traditions in the subcontinent. These groups brought new languages, beliefs, and social structures, which began to merge with the remnants of earlier civilizations, creating a complex and evolving cultural landscape. This period marked the transition from ancient urban civilization to a more diverse and layered society, where traditions, languages, and identities began to take shape over centuries. It is within this evolving cultural environment that the early foundations of religion, philosophy, and social organization in South Asia began to form, setting the stage for the next great transformation in the region's history, where belief systems and cultural identity would become deeply interconnected and influence generations to come. Part 3. Religious and cultural formation. After the decline of the Indus Valley Civilization, the land of modern Pakistan did not fall into emptiness or silence. Instead, it entered a long and complex period of cultural transformation, where migrating peoples, local traditions, and evolving belief systems began to interact and shape the spiritual identity of the region. Over centuries, Indo-Aryan groups gradually moved into parts of the subcontinent, bringing with them new languages, oral traditions, and early religious ideas that would later evolve into some of the oldest spiritual texts in human history. These traditions were not written at first, but passed down orally through generations, forming hymns, rituals, and philosophical reflections on nature, life, and the cosmos. This early cultural foundation eventually contributed to the development of Vedic traditions, which became one of the most influential religious systems in South Asia. At the same time, the region was not culturally uniform. Different communities continued to exist, including descendants of earlier Indus Valley populations, mountain tribes, and agricultural societies, each contributing to a diverse cultural landscape. This diversity meant that beliefs, customs, and practices did not develop in a single direction, but instead evolved through interaction, adaptation, and exchange. Over time, ideas about spirituality began to deepen, focusing on concepts such as harmony, duty, ritual practice, and the relationship between humans and nature. As centuries passed, these early traditions gradually influenced the broader cultural identity of the region, laying the groundwork for later philosophical and religious systems that would emerge in South Asia. The area also became part of early trade and communication networks, connecting different regions and allowing ideas to spread beyond local communities. This exchange of goods and thoughts helped shape a shared cultural environment, even though political unity did not yet exist. During this long period, There were no fixed national boundaries or unified states in the modern sense, but rather a mosaic of tribes, communities, and small kingdoms, each contributing to the evolving identity of the land. Religion and culture were deeply intertwined with daily life, influencing agriculture, social organization, and community values. It is within this gradual and layered process of cultural formation that the spiritual and philosophical roots of the region began to take shape, creating a foundation that would later influence major religious traditions, including early Hinduism, Buddhism, and other belief systems that would emerge in the centuries ahead. This period was not defined by a single empire or ruler, but by slow and continuous transformation, where identity was shaped not through conquest alone, but through ideas, traditions, and human connection. As this cultural foundation matured, the region moved toward a new historical phase, where organized states and imperial powers would begin to rise and reshape the political landscape of South Asia forever. Part 4. Medieval and Imperial Period. As centuries passed, the region that is now modern Pakistan entered a new and powerful phase of its history, shaped by the rise of great empires, expanding trade routes, and the gradual transformation of political and cultural life across South Asia. This period was defined not by one single civilization, but by a succession of kingdoms and imperial powers that rose and fell, each leaving a lasting impact on the land, its people, and its identity. One of the most influential forces during this era was the expansion of the Islamic world into South Asia, beginning in the early 8th century when Muhammad bin Qasim led campaigns into Sindh. This marked one of the earliest points of sustained contact between Islamic governance and the Indian subcontinent. Over time, Islam gradually spread through trade, migration, scholarship, and Sufi missionary traditions rather than through conquest alone. Sufi saints played a particularly important role, establishing spiritual centers and promoting messages of peace, devotion, and unity, which deeply influenced local communities and helped shape the cultural and religious identity of the region. As time progressed, powerful dynasties and empires rose across the subcontinent, including the Delhi Sultanate and later the Mughal Empire, one of the most significant imperial powers in South Asian history. The Mughal era brought administrative organization, architectural achievement, and cultural development that left a permanent mark on the region. Cities expanded, trade flourished, and artistic expression reached new heights through architecture, literature, and craftsmanship. The blending of Persian, Central Asian, and local South Asian traditions created a rich and diverse cultural environment that is still visible today in language, art, and heritage across the region. During this imperial period, the area of modern Pakistan was strategically important due to its location connecting Central Asia, the Middle East, and the Indian subcontinent. Trade routes passed through its lands, bringing goods, ideas, and cultural influences from distant regions. However, this era was also marked by continuous power struggles, shifting alliances, and territorial conflicts between competing kingdoms and empires. Despite these changes, local societies continued to evolve, adapting to new political structures while preserving their cultural identities. Over time, the balance of power in South Asia began to shift once again with the arrival of European colonial forces, particularly the British East India Company, which gradually expanded its control over the region. This transition marked the beginning of a new historical phase, as imperial rule from within the subcontinent gave way to external colonial dominance, setting the stage for dramatic political, economic, and social changes that would reshape the future of the entire region. As the influence of traditional empires declined and colonial power grew stronger, the region entered a period of tension, resistance, and transformation that would eventually lead to one of the most significant turning points in its history. Part 5. Colonial and Expansion Era. As the power of the great South Asian empires gradually weakened, a new force began to reshape the destiny of the region that is now modern Pakistan. This force did not arrive as a traditional empire at first, but as a trading company, the British East India Company, which slowly expanded its influence through commerce, diplomacy, and military intervention. What began as trade agreements in coastal cities eventually turned into political control over vast territories, marking the beginning of a major colonial transformation in South Asia. By the mid-18th and 19th centuries, British authority had extended across much of the Indian subcontinent, including the regions that now form Pakistan. The colonial administration introduced new systems of governance, taxation, law, and infrastructure, fundamentally altering the existing social and economic structures. Railways were built, canals were constructed, and new administrative cities emerged. These developments connected distant regions more tightly than ever before, but they were primarily designed to serve colonial economic interests, especially the extraction of resources and agricultural production. During this period, the local population experienced both modernization and hardship. On one hand, new institutions such as schools, courts, and administrative systems were introduced. On the other hand, heavy taxation, economic exploitation, and political control created widespread inequality and social tension. Traditional industries were disrupted, and local economies were often reshaped to benefit colonial trade networks rather than indigenous development. Culturally, this era also became a time of intellectual awakening. New ideas about governance, identity, and self-determination began to spread among educated groups in the subcontinent. Reform movements emerged, aiming to address social issues and preserve cultural traditions under changing political conditions. At the same time, modern education systems introduced new ways of thinking, which contributed to the rise of political awareness among different communities. As the 19th century progressed into the early 20th century, resistance to colonial rule gradually intensified. Political organizations began to form, representing various religious, cultural, and regional interests. Among these movements, the demand for political representation and independence became increasingly strong. The idea that the people of the subcontinent should have the right to govern themselves began to take root across different groups. Tensions between communities, combined with growing nationalist movements, eventually led to significant political developments that reshaped the future of the region. The struggle for independence became more organized and widespread, setting the stage for one of the most dramatic and consequential events in South Asian history: the end of colonial rule and the division of the subcontinent into separate nations. This transition would not come peacefully or easily. Instead, it would be marked by immense social upheaval, migration, and conflict, leading directly into the next and most defining moment in the modern history of Pakistan. Part 6: Crisis and Revolution. As the colonial era of British rule approached its final years, the political and social atmosphere across the Indian subcontinent became increasingly tense, especially in the regions that would later become modern Pakistan. The demand for independence was no longer a distant idea. It had become a powerful and unavoidable reality shaped by decades of political struggle, cultural identity, and competing visions for the future. By the early 20th century, two major forces were rising simultaneously: the broader movement for independence from British rule and the growing debate over how a post-colonial subcontinent should be structured. These discussions were not simple, as they involved deeply rooted religious, cultural, and political differences between various communities. During this period, one of the most significant developments was the increasing political awareness among Muslims of the subcontinent, who began to express concerns about representation, identity, and future governance in an independent India. political organizations grew stronger and debates intensified over whether a single unified state or separate political arrangements would best protect different communities. As World War II weakened the British Empire economically and politically, pressure for independence reached a breaking point. Britain could no longer maintain control over its vast colonial territories, and negotiations for withdrawal began. However, the question of how independence would be granted quickly became one of the most complex and emotional issues in modern history. This tension ultimately led to the creation of two separate nations in 1947, an event known as the Partition of India. The birth of Pakistan was driven by the leadership and vision of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who advocated for a separate homeland for Muslims of the subcontinent. What followed was one of the largest mass migrations in human history. Millions of people were forced to move across newly drawn borders, leaving behind homes, lands, and communities that had existed for generations. This period was marked by widespread violence, displacement, and deep human suffering. Entire families were uprooted, and trust between communities was severely damaged. Cities, villages, and transport routes became scenes of chaos as people struggled to reach what they believed would be safety on either side of the new border. At the same time, this moment also represented hope for millions who saw independence as the beginning of a new national identity. Pakistan emerged as a new state, built on the idea of self-determination, but immediately faced enormous challenges, including refugee crises, administrative instability, and the need to build governing institutions from the ground up. The early years of independence were not peaceful or stable. Instead, they were defined by survival, reconstruction, and the difficult process of turning a political idea into a functioning country. The legacy of partition continued to shape relationships, politics, and identity in the region for decades to come. This era of crisis and revolution did not end with independence. It marked the beginning of a new struggle, the formation of a modern state from the aftermath of division, conflict, and hope. That transformation leads directly into the next chapter of history, where Pakistan begins its journey as an independent nation, navigating the challenges of state building and survival. Part 7. Modern State Formation. With the creation of Pakistan in 1947, a new chapter in history began, one not defined by ancient empires or colonial rule, but by the difficult process of building an entirely new nation from the ground up. Independence brought hope, but it also brought immediate and overwhelming challenges that tested the survival of the young state from its very first day. The new country faced a massive refugee crisis following partition. Millions of people had crossed borders during the events of 1947, leaving behind homes, land, and livelihoods. Cities such as Karachi, Lahore, and other urban centers were suddenly overwhelmed with displaced populations. Providing food, shelter, security, and basic administration became an urgent national priority. At the same time, the government itself was still in its earliest form, with limited institutions and resources to manage such a large-scale humanitarian crisis. In these early years, the leadership of Muhammad Ali Jinnah played a central role in guiding the new state. However, his death shortly after independence in 1948 created a leadership vacuum that added further uncertainty to the country's future direction. The absence of strong and stable institutions made the process of governance more complex, as Pakistan worked to define its political identity and constitutional structure. During the 1950s and 1960s, Pakistan went through significant political experimentation, including changes in governance systems, constitutional development, and shifts between civilian and military leadership. The country attempted to stabilize its institutions while also addressing economic development, education, and national integration across diverse regions. However, political instability remained a recurring challenge, shaping much of the country's early state-building experience. Economically, Pakistan began focusing on agriculture, infrastructure, and industrial development. Efforts were made to modernize transportation networks, expand irrigation systems, and improve urban development. These initiatives aimed to strengthen national unity by connecting distant regions and supporting economic growth. Though progress was often uneven due to political changes and limited resources. On the international stage, Pakistan positioned itself within the complex dynamics of the Cold War era, forming strategic alliances and seeking support from global powers. This period also marked the beginning of long-term regional tensions, particularly with neighboring countries, which would continue to influence foreign policy and security priorities for decades. Despite challenges, this era also laid the foundation for national identity. Language, culture, education, and political discourse gradually began to define what it meant to be part of the new nation. Debates over governance, religion, and cultural direction shaped the evolving identity of the state, reflecting the diversity and complexity of its population. By the end of this formative period, Pakistan had survived its most fragile years and begun the slow process of institutional development. However, its journey was far from stable or complete. The pressures of governance, regional conflict, and political change continued to shape its path, leading into a modern era defined by both progress and ongoing challenges. This evolving identity sets the stage for the present-day story of Pakistan, where history, tradition, and modern ambition continue to intersect in a rapidly changing world. Part 7. Modern State Formation. With the creation of Pakistan in 1947, a new chapter in history began, one not defined by ancient empires or colonial rule, but by the difficult process of building an entirely new nation from the ground up. Independence brought hope, but it also brought immediate and overwhelming challenges that tested the survival of the young state from its very first day. The new country faced a massive refugee crisis following partition. Millions of people had crossed borders during the events of 1947, leaving behind homes, land, and livelihoods. Cities such as Karachi, Lahore, and other urban centers were suddenly overwhelmed with displaced populations. Providing food, shelter, security, and basic administration became an urgent national priority. At the same time, the government itself was still in its earliest form, with limited institutions and resources to manage such a large-scale humanitarian crisis. In these early years, the leadership of Muhammad Ali Jinnah played a central role in guiding the new state. However, his death shortly after independence in 1948 created a leadership vacuum that added further uncertainty to the country's future direction. The absence of strong and stable institutions made the process of governance more complex, as Pakistan worked to define its political identity and constitutional structure. During the 1950s and 1960s, Pakistan went through significant political experimentation, including changes in governance systems, constitutional development, and shifts between civilian and military leadership. The country attempted to stabilize its institutions while also addressing economic development, education, and national integration across diverse regions. However, political instability remained a recurring challenge, shaping much of the country's early state-building experience. Economically, Pakistan began focusing on agriculture, infrastructure, and industrial development. Efforts were made to modernize transportation networks, expand irrigation systems, and improve urban development. These initiatives aimed to strengthen national unity by connecting distant regions and supporting economic growth, though progress was often uneven due to political changes and limited resources. On the international stage, Pakistan positioned itself within the complex dynamics of the Cold War era, forming strategic alliances and seeking support from global powers. This period also marked the beginning of long-term regional tensions, particularly with neighboring countries, which would continue to influence foreign policy and security priorities for decades. Despite challenges, this era also laid the foundation for national identity. Language, culture, education, and political discourse gradually began to define what it meant to be part of the new nation. Debates over governance, religion, and cultural direction shaped the evolving identity of the state, reflecting the diversity and complexity of its population. By the end of this formative period, Pakistan had survived its most fragile years and begun the slow process of institutional development. However, its journey was far from stable or complete. The pressures of governance, regional conflict, and political change continued to shape its path, leading into a modern era defined by both progress and ongoing challenges. This evolving identity sets the stage for the present-day story of Pakistan, where history, tradition, and modern ambition continue to intersect in a rapidly changing world. Part 8. Present-day identity. Today, the story of Pakistan is the story of a nation shaped by deep history, complex struggles, and continuous transformation. From its prehistoric beginnings to its formation as a modern state in 1947, Pakistan now stands as a country balancing tradition and modernity in a rapidly changing global world. In the present day, Pakistan is a diverse and dynamic nation with a population of over 240 million people, representing a wide range of ethnic groups, languages, and cultural traditions. Urdu serves as the national language, while regional languages such as Punjabi, Sindhi, Pashto, and Balochi reflect the country's rich cultural diversity. This linguistic and cultural variety is not a weakness, but a defining feature of national identity. Economically, Pakistan continues to develop across multiple sectors, including agriculture, manufacturing, technology, and services. Major cities such as Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad act as economic and administrative hubs, driving growth and innovation. Infrastructure development, trade partnerships, and digital expansion are increasingly shaping the country's economic future in the modern global economy. Politically, Pakistan remains a parliamentary republic with an active democratic system that continues to evolve. Like many developing nations, it faces challenges related to governance, economic stability, and institutional strengthening. However, it also demonstrates resilience through ongoing reforms, civic engagement, and participation in global affairs. On the international stage, Pakistan plays a strategic role due to its geographic location, connecting South Asia, Central Asia, and the Middle East. It participates in regional organizations, diplomatic relations, and global initiatives focused on trade, security, and climate challenges. Its foreign policy continues to balance national interests with international cooperation. Culturally, Pakistan remains deeply connected to its historical roots, while also embracing modern influences. Literature, music, sports, and film continue to evolve, reflecting both traditional values and contemporary creativity. Cricket, in particular, serves as a powerful symbol of national unity and pride, bringing people together across regions and backgrounds. At the same time, Pakistan faces ongoing challenges, including population growth, energy demands, climate vulnerability, and social development needs. Yet these challenges are also driving innovation, reform, and long-term planning for the future. The younger generation, which makes up a large portion of the population, is increasingly shaping the country's direction through education, entrepreneurship, and digital engagement. Ultimately, the present identity of Pakistan is not defined by a single narrative, but by a continuous process of change. It is a nation built on ancient civilizations, shaped by empires, transformed by colonial history, born through independence, and now evolving in the modern world. And as history continues to move forward, the story of Pakistan remains unfinished, not as a conclusion, but as an ongoing journey of identity, resilience, and transformation. And that is the complete story of Pakistan. From the earliest footprints of prehistoric humans through ancient civilizations, powerful empires, colonial rule, independence, and into the modern nation we see today. History is never just about the past. It is about understanding how every civilization, every struggle, and every generation has shaped the world we live in right now. If you enjoyed this journey through time, thank you for staying until the end. Your support truly helps bring more deep historical documentaries like this to life. Now I want to hear from you. What country should we explore next in our future episodes? Should we continue with Europe, Asia, Africa, the Americas, or the Middle East? Tell me in the comments which region or country you want next, and I will prepare the next full historical documentary for you. And if you found value in this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so more people can travel through history with us. May we always learn from the past to build a better future, and may peace, knowledge, and understanding guide every viewer watching this around the world. Thank you for watching.